You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, and the One News Now mobile app. For American Family News, I'm Steve Jordahl.
Darkness is not an affirmative force. It simply reoccupies the space vacated by the light.
This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
It should be uncomfortable for a believer to live as a hypocrite.
Delivering people out of the bondage of mainstream media and the philosophies of this world.
God has called you and me to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment. Let's not miss our moment.
And now, the Hamilton Corner.
Good evening. Welcome to the Hamilton Corner here on American Family Radio. I'm your host, Abraham Hamilton III, joined by the full J-Squared contingent. Mr. Jason Tross on my right, Mr. Jeff Reed on my left, Marty Sparks lighting up the dark from the screening room, and we are all on deck to bring you another edition of the Hamilton Corner. Thank you for joining us on the program. You could be anywhere, listen to anything you want, but you have chosen to hang out with us in the corner, and I am extremely grateful and appreciative, as is our entire team here. We thank you for doing that. As most of you are making your way from your part-time jobs to your full-time jobs, I just want to offer the repeated encouragement that I like to offer to show up for work. To show up for work, recognizing the tremendous, blessed privilege it is to serve a family. You know, one of the passions in my heart is to invite, challenge, provoke, whatever word you want to throw in there, husbands to take the positions as husbands in our families. I believe a lot of the things we are facing today would be reversed if we truly understood our roles there. When you see things like the feminist movement, and you see things like the sexual deviancy political agenda, some might not think that there's a connection there, but the central point of it all is to mar the image of God. The Lord explicitly revealed in his word that he created male and female in his image. So authentic masculinity and femininity, an authentic display, really is a reflection of the image of God. And I said before that I would suggest to you that the goal of it all is to mar both masculinity and femininity, to reduce mankind into an indistinguishable amalgamation of humanity, to where there's nothing unique or distinct about maleness or femaleness, but it's just one big goo of humanity as the ultimate thumb in the eye of the Lord. And quite frankly, when you understand that that is what is at play, you also understand that that is not only a threat to male masculinity and femininity, but it's actually an attack on the authority of Scripture and the gospel. Because if the culture is allowed, because it won't be successful, because the Lord's word will not be changed, but the culture can decide to reject the Lord's word. And when the culture continuously rejects the Lord's word, and that is passed down generationally, it then causes there to be a questioning about the authority of Scripture, not only in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, but also in Genesis 3. So when you see the combination of all of those things, you recognize, man, this is not just some cultural drift. This is a Scud missile launched from the depths of satanic scheming. And one of the great casualties of that is that nowadays, you have men that are averse to manhood. You have this arresting of development, to where now, as our society, we have culturally normalized men maintaining immaturity. You know, I'm not trying to knock anybody or throw shade on anybody, but the Bible says, when I was a child, I thought as a child, but now that I'm a man, I've put childish things behind me. There should be a break between immaturity and maturity. One of those, you would talk about make America great again. We need to make marriage great again, make manhood great again, and to invite our young men. When you see the increasing percentage of children being born into families where fathers are absent, what is that doing? It's normalizing father absence. So then what happens societally, manhood becomes optional. And then what happens then? People begin to question, well, do we really even need men? What's a man anyway? Who needs that? And when you understand that the family is a fundamental rubric for any civil society, that the family is the fundamental rubric of the church, but when you take that fundamental rubric away by removing the men who are supposed to be heads of families, guess what happens? Societal implosion. So what I'm saying, what are the passions that I have? Of course, you listen to the program, you know I have a lot of passion. Especially for our men. Man, let's square up and see our first mission field, if you will, our first ecclesiastical assignment, our first divine prerogative is to serve our families. Let us shepherd our families well. Let us exercise the spiritual discipline that is necessary to love our wives, to lay our lives down for our families, to demonstrate what it looks like. The no greater love as any man than this, than to lay down his life for his friends. Let's demonstrate that first and foremost in our homes. And as that is positioned, realigned according to the auspices of the Lord, you'll see other things begin to line up. And I know I've had personal interactions with people, and I've read all sorts of things. I know some circumstances are extremely difficult. I know some of you right now saying, but you don't know my situation. You're right, I don't know your situation, but you know who does? The one who searches the heart and rewards according to what he finds there. The one who is omniscient and omnipotent. He knows. And I will say, without fear of successful contradiction, that there is no circumstance that is too far gone to where the Spirit of the Lord is unable to bring things into alignment. I'm telling you. I wish you knew the number of stories, the people, the husbands and wives, estranged that I've had sit around my own dining room tables, praying with folks telling me, Abe, I don't care what you say. This is over. And I said, I hear what you're saying. But let's not focus on down the line 50s. Let's start one moment at a time, one step at a time. And I'm telling you, if you would open yourself up to recalibrating yourself first. That's one of the big problems, I think. As human beings, we have this tendency to be projectionist, if you will. It's always somebody else's fault. Don't worry so much about what they're doing. Let's focus right at home first. And to open yourself up to say, you know what? No matter what, I'm going to go God's way. And you'll see the Lord not merely perform miracles, but transform you into a miracle. Tell you what I know. Not just because I know it. It's in the scripto. Praise God. Galatians chapter 6 is where I'm going to start. And this actually fits in somewhat into what we were talking about here. Galatians chapter 6, 3 verses. Verses 7 through 9 is where we are going to go. This is the epistle of the Apostle Paul to the church at Galatia. And so much I could say about this, but I've already been spending a lot of time. So let's just dig into this. Galatians chapter 6, verses 7 through 10. Here we go. I'm going to read it. Verse 7. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption. But the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap, if we do not give up. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. Now, one of the continuous predicaments of the human condition, one of the most blatant enemies of enthusiasm, is time. You take anything you think about. One of the clearest examples we have of that is right around January 1st every year. What happens? The gyms in town all get new memberships. And the people who work out on a regular basis, they have a joke among themselves and say, wait a couple weeks to the New Year resolution makers get back to the normal way of living. Then we'll have all our machines back in the gyms, right? Because you have people who at the moment, they really mean what they say. Hey, I'm going to work out, I'm going to get in shape, I'm going to do all of these things. But then what happens invariably, that enthusiasm meets time. Even among, professional athletes, Charles Barkley has this saying, Father Time is undefeated. No matter how great you are, you can be Air Jordan, but guess what? Over time, you're going to be Ground Jordan because Father Time is undefeated. Well, that is when you look at things naturally. Now, when you peel into this scripture, remember Galatians 6 comes after Galatians 5, and there are no chapter and verse demarcations in the original Greek manuscripts. But when the Apostle Paul writes, and let us not grow weary of doing good, what is the good doing that he's most likely referring to there? I would submit to you, he's referring to the fruit of the Spirit as laid out for us in Galatians 5:22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, patience or long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. I would submit to you that the Apostle Paul is saying that we are not to be wearied in displaying the fruit of the Spirit. Well, then how do you go about that, Abe? How do we accomplish that? He tells us in chapter 8, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever one sows, that he will also reap. For one who sows to his own flesh will from that sowing reap corruption. Conversely, he who sows to his spirit will reap the fruit of sowing into the Spirit. So what am I saying? The exercise of spiritual discipline is not exclusively for others externally, but by sowing to the Spirit, you fortify yourselves. We fortify ourselves against petering out over time. By sowing to the Spirit, we fortify our ability for the spirit man to be robust in our lives so that we are able to avoid the Father Time being undefeated spiritually, where we're able to thrive even the more. I never forget my pastor in New Orleans, man. I thank God for having a godly pastor. He used to always remind us, Abe, you don't want to blow up and blow out. You don't want to blow up and blow out. But that we have a constant burn that is not a fire filtered through emotion, but it's a fire that is lit by the constant responding to the leading, directing, teaching, and conviction of the Spirit of God. The Lord knows that we as human beings have the tendency to peter out over time, for the embers to wear out, for that flame to go out, if the flame is being fanned naturally. But by sowing to the Spirit, we're able to live, Galatians 6:9, and not grow weary of well-doing. And not grow weary in well-doing. So that the fruit of the Spirit doesn't become, or is not merely a display externally, but it becomes your character. It becomes, dare I say, your identity. It becomes, when you're squeezed, what comes out? The fruit of the Spirit. But it only happens by sowing continually, consistently to the Spirit. By sowing, investing. Consider yourself like a fertile farmland. And your desire is to reap a mighty harvest. But you know, in order for that harvest to grow, the seed must be sown appropriately. The fields must be irrigated appropriately. The soil must be turned over appropriately. So that when the desired harvest time comes, you're able to have that ripe harvest. This is something that cannot be pursued carnally. This is something that cannot be participated in carnally. This is a spiritual enterprise. A part of that sowing is to be joined to local assemblies of worshipers. I've shared before Hebrews 10:24 and 25. Not forsaking the assemblies of themselves together, as the habit of some is. I've shared before that forsaking is probably not the best rendering for that. The best rendering is probably neglecting or abandoning, because the rendering there is really somewhat militaristic in the terminology, that has the mindset of soldiers arraying themselves for battle, but then at the moment where the sparks fly, we retreat, leaving a member there alone, which is why then the Hebrew writer comes back and says, and as much as we see that evil day approaching, we are to admonish and to exhort one another. God will not be mocked. So to the Spirit.
Don't mess with Texas babies. I am Matt Staver with Freedom's Call. Texas will soon be a safe state for abortion survivors. Governor Abbott has signed a law protecting babies born alive after attempted abortions. The babies must be given the same level of care as any other infant in order to survive. And doctors that withhold care from these infants will be fined and charged with a felony. This Texas law is one that every compassionate and humane person should support. After all, this is the alternative option. The baby would be left by itself to suffer in anguish for an unknown period of time. Then the infant would die alone. Not attempting to save the life of a baby born alive is infanticide, plain and simple. It's hard to comprehend the fact that there's even a debate on this issue. It's just inhumane. Ask any abortion survivor. Stay informed at Liberty Counsel's website, lc.org. That's lc.org.
On American Family Radio, this is Barry McGuire. I'm a car guy, and I'm here to help you understand God's purpose for your life through the eyes of a layman. Simply put, assumptions are things we take for granted without any proof. And as a Christian, that certainly applies to sharing your faith. Do you assume you have to have special training before you start sharing your faith? Quite the contrary. There's no training required. Or that sharing your faith is an option? Jesus commanded that we go into all the world and proclaim the gospel, the good news. Here's an assumption you can take for granted. Satan doesn't want you to share your faith. So when you say nothing, you make him very happy. And here's another. You know that prompting you feel when Satan doesn't want you to say anything? That's the Holy Spirit's prompt, his nudge. So who do you want to please? It is your choice. Your job is to ignite revival outside the walls of your church by moving everyone every day closer to Jesus. If you need help doing that, go to rotw.com.
Brian Fisher here with today's Life and Liberty Minute. Back when I was fresh out of college, I played quite a bit of pickup basketball. One of the guys who was part of our crew was a missionary who had lived all over the world. We were talking one day about campus unrest and the students who blamed America for the world's ills. He said to me, I've noticed that the people who hate America haven't lived anywhere else. Today's Americans are the most privileged citizens in human history, as America enjoys unparalleled prosperity and opportunity and the finest constitution in human history. The lack of gratitude to God for what he has given us here is appalling. Now, that liberty is something we must fight for and must defend every day, because there are people, even right here among us, who want to take it away. So let's enjoy our freedom and protect it for everyone.
Catch Brian Fisher on Focal Point, weekday afternoons at 105 Central on American Family Radio.
Shining light into the darkness. This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner here at American Family Radio. Time to delve into a bit of the foolishness du jour. So I don't know if you heard some of the latest shenanigans from Amazon. Oh yeah, some Amazonian shenanigans. I'm not talking about the Amazon jungle. I'm talking about that Amazon that's in those boxes with those lookalike smiley faces to your house. Following a complaint from one individual, dude by the name of Rojo Allen. He complained that Amazon was selling books from people who have been set free from homosexuality. So let me get into it. They began by removing a Catholic psychologist's books as a result of pressure from the LGBT, sexual deviancy, political agenda advocates. activists. They started with that guy. Now they've removed the works of other authors who once lived as and identified themselves as gay. Those people, the works of Ann Polk of the Restored Hope Network, and a person who's described as a pastoral counselor by the name of Joe Dallas, are among the latest books to be pulled from the online retail giant. Joe Dallas's book, titled Desires in Conflict, Hope for Men Who Struggle with Sexual Identity. And if you're listening, don't worry, I'm not going to go into too much, any lurid details, but I want you to be aware of what's going on here. And then Ann Polk's book, Restoring Sexual Identity, Hope for Women Who Struggle with Same-Sex Attraction. Until a couple days ago, both of those books were being sold on Amazon's platform. But now, those books have been yanked from the platform. Now, this is from the people who tell us, you know, they are pro-choice, you know, they are pro-science, they are pro intellectual rigor, you know. But how rigorous intellectually can you be if you refuse to sell books that offer an opinion that may disagree with your opinion? And my man Will Addison, co-host of Airing the Addisons, describes it as a modern-day book burning, which is exactly what it is. And I've made this point before, and I'm going to make it again here, because many of the people who are proponents of this book burning, they're the same ones who would argue that human sexuality is fluid, right? Like water. It's fluid. But if it's fluid, how come they only want it to flow in one direction? Now, these people are not talking about what they heard. They're not talking about what somebody else said. They're explaining their own experiences. And at the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference, I had the pleasure of meeting Stephen Black and Laura Perry. Laura Perry has written a book. Last I checked, it's still on there, but maybe it won't be there for much longer. She wrote a book called From Transgender to Transformed. How she, after undergoing multiple surgeries, including a double mastectomy, the Lord stepped in and freed her. And she tells her testimony. Now, don't you think in this so-called tolerant, pro-intellectual rigor society, y'all know all that is hooey, and you know that's hogwash, you would want more opinions than one? No, they don't. They don't want more opinions than one. And it's one of the evidences of a feeble argument when you shut down an opposing view. Well, it has happened. Joe Dallas, in responding to the Christian Post, they reached out to him after they learned that Amazon removed his books. Joe Dallas said this, quote, Amazon's decision is no surprise since today's culture is caving to the goals of the LGBTQ political movement, which have always included the silencing of any disapproval of homosexuality. It would be awfully naive to think, and this is the important point, folks, it would be awfully naive to, not the important point, but an important point. Let me say that. It would be awfully naive to think it will stop here. First, the LGBTQ movement will convince the culture that telling homosexuals they can change is dangerous. Then, they'll convince the culture that calling homosexuality a sin is dangerous. Then, the government will tell pastors of America what they can or cannot say on this subject, and the culture will approve, end quote. And you know what? He's exactly right. And he's not right because it's prescient. This is already happening. I've shared before how in other countries, Sweden, Canada, and other places, you can't quote from Romans 1 on the airwaves. You cannot. It has been declared hate speech, and you cannot quote from it on their airwaves. I'm telling you, this exists right now, and what Amazon's doing is the latest move in that direction. It's the latest move in that direction. And it just so happens to be occurring at about the same time that there are people advocating for so-called gay Christianity. If you haven't noticed it yet, folks, the walls are closing in. And you probably, who in this listening audience, probably have had this presented to you. why is it that Christians, only sin they want to talk about is homosexuality? Why do they only spend time talking about homosexuality? I'm like, okay. For the people who are in the back of the room, when was the last time you saw a political organization created to advocate for adultery? When was the last time you went to a thief's pride parade, right? All us who like to steal, let's unite. Let's get our symbols in march. We are a marginalized minority. Thieves. I mean, come on, y'all get the point that I'm making. You don't see any well-funded, highly organized political initiative to try to establish a protected class for the sins of fornication. Yeah, have you saw that? I'm a fornicator, and I want to see the Civil Rights Act of 1964 amended to add a protected class status for me. Because I don't like marriage, but I sure like me some womans. That don't happen. That is why you see the conversation around these issues, because you have a continual political operative that is highly funded and made highly visible that are seeking to secure special, dare I say, superior rights. Is it that hard to comprehend? Now, I will say this. In some instances, it is true that many churches have become mum on sexuality, violations of God's standards for sexuality in a heterosexual context. That's true. I've talked about that on this program. But you still don't see anybody marching on Washington. You know, you don't see the news media fawning over, oh, I have a new marginalized minority. These are adulterers of the world unite. They want their time. News at 10. Senator McConnell, what do you think about the adulterers' rights? It doesn't happen. Doesn't happen. Although, I got a story, and I'm not going to get to this today. I'm going to get to this tomorrow. But the American Psychological Association is just preparing a new inquiry into a new marginalized minority group. Those who they call themselves consensual non-monogamous. Yeah, look at Jeff's face. I wish you could see it. Consensual non-monogamous. They're a marginalized minority, a sexual minority. These are people who are consensually averse to commitment to one person for sexual intimacy. Yeah. So polyamorous, swingers groups, these folks, they are now identifying themselves as a new marginalized minority. Oh, yeah. You don't want to miss tomorrow's show. We're going to go into that. The American Psychological Association. You know, they're very scientific. But, oh, yeah. So Amazon is like, So we will allow books on homosexuality only if they're about how people can become better homosexuals, not people who have been set free or no longer homosexuals. And listen, I'm just sharing this stuff with you so you can know what's going on. This is happening today. Yeah. My man Will called it a modern day book burning. He's right. Moving right along. Just want to give you some more information. Let's information hour in the Hamilton Corner, right? This is just one of those things. I'm not going to dig too deep into this. I'm just let you have this information and keep it rolling. George Soros, you heard that name? Many of you know that name. Charles Koch. Have many of you heard that name? Charles Koch, one of the Koch brothers. Billionaire libertarian. Well, guess what? George Soros and Charles Koch have now teamed up to form a new nonprofit organization centered on advancing a pacifist foreign policy. Oh, yeah, you like this. Yes. George Soros and Charles Koch are joining their billionaire fortunes together to use their many resources to advocate for pacifism globally. But this particular organization is created for one purpose, to remove the American political needle to become anti-war. Now, this is the same George Soros who, one of his primary funded outfits is called the Open Society. What do they exist for? A world with no borders. Oh, yeah. And Charles Koch, who many of you all thought was conservative, You start noticing, oh no, Susie, I'm not kidding. Susie asked on the Book of Faces whether I'm kidding. No, I'm not kidding at all. The new organization is called the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. The Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Whether Charles Koch and George Soros, they're working together, uniting for the purpose of global pacifism. Now, most of us know about George Soros. Many of us don't know as much about Charles Koch, but let me just let you know. The Koch brothers surprised some previously described conservatives when the Koch brothers came out in support of amnesty. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. This is why. Listen, I'm just going to tell you. If you put your faith in men for political outcomes, your faith is misfounded. That's why we have to tether ourselves to the Lord and to the Lord alone. Because what you're going to do when your person flips sides like Anakin. So now you have the Soros-Koch contingent. Now they're working together. And some of you wonder, man, I wonder, all of this, illegal immigration talk, Republicans have been in power and they never did anything about it. Because as you know, Charles Koch and the Koch brothers funded a lot of the Republican candidates. Many of them supported, and this would be a great time to mention this. I may even have to play the audio. Because today, Ross Perot, independent presidential candidate, ran for the office in 92 and 96, self-made billionaire, came out of the depression to become a billionaire. He warned these people want to pass NAFTA. I've shared before in the program how if you really want to see how China began to become the global superpower it is, came when Bill Clinton reclassified their trade status so that they no longer had to have it renewed annually, but they can get the equivalent of most favorite trade partner status without having to have the atrocities of their human rights records and the details of their communism presented before the American public every year. That happened under Bill Clinton. Around about the same time that NAFTA was signed. Isn't that interesting? The North American Free Trade Agreement that just coincidentally corresponded with a lot of the manufacturing jobs in America going sucked overseas. Let me let Ross Perot tell you about it. Jason, if you would, please play clip number 2.
If you're paying $12, $13, $14 an hour for factory workers, and you can move your factory south of the border, pay $1 an hour for labor, hire a young 25, that's assuming you've been in business for a long time, you've got a mature workforce. Pay $1 an hour for your labor, have no health care, that's the most expensive single element in making a car, have no environmental controls, no pollution controls, and no retirement, and you don't care about anything but making money, there will be a giant sucking sound going south. So if the people send me to Washington, the first thing I'll do is study that 2,000-page agreement and make sure it's a two-way street.
Now, I'm not saying that to say that I support all Ross Perot's ideas, but I tell you what, he was right about NAFTA. He was right about NAFTA. And, I'm just pointing all of this out because when you see what I'm going to share with you now about the Koch brothers, or Charles Koch specifically, I don't want to say the Koch brothers because it's just Charles. Lining up with George Soros, I would contend that you're just seeing now on Front Street what's been happening behind the scenes for a lot of years. So just want to let you know that. A little bit more information for you. It's the information power hour. So I talked yesterday about Jeffrey Upstein, him being newly charged for his nastiness with underage girls. Well, guess what happened today? Jeffrey Epstein's lawyers contacted the prosecutor's office in New York saying that and they did what's called a proffer. We offer to testify against a whole lot of other people that's dirty in exchange for a 5-year sentence. Now listen, folks, I'm going to tell you. As a prosecutor, when you got the defendant coming to you saying, listen, I'll take this deal, that's because they know it's not looking too good, man. It's not looking too good for you. So Epstein, and this is reported by One American News, contacted the prosecutors in New York. Now remember, he made his initial appearance. That will be his arraignment yesterday in court. And his defense lawyers contacted the prosecutor's office saying he will agree to give up the names of individuals who took part in the trafficking ring he's charged with running in exchange for a 5-year sentence. Now, the man is 66 years old, and he's asking for 5 years because the 2 counts that he's charged with have a total of 45 years. If he gets anything over 20, at least 20, that's a life sentence for him. So he's saying, I will sing for you if you give me a 5-year sentence. And it's got a lot of people that's getting a little nervous, getting a little hotter out in the collar. And Bill Clinton issued a statement today. I'm going to let you know about that on the other side of the break, and we'll take phone calls.
In the book of Isaiah, the word tells us, the grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of our God endures forever. In the same way, without careful planning, your financial goals could blow away like the seeds of a dandelion. It's never too early or too late to consider how a charitable gift annuity can help you meet the financial goals you've set for your loved ones, your causes, and yourself. Give AFA Foundation a call at 800-326-4543, extension 345, or visit our website, afafoundation.net. Let us explain how a charitable gift annuity can help you achieve your goals. As we read in Proverbs, the plans of the diligent lead to profit. Our phone number again is 800-326-4543, extension 345. And our website is afafoundation.net.
Social gospel versus the saving gospel. This is David Wheaton, host of The Christian Worldview. A growing movement of professed woke evangelicals see the church as white-centric against blacks, sexist against women, and unwelcoming toward homosexuals. These evangelicals are being influenced by cultural Marxism, which stokes the grievances of certain identity groups to overthrow the white privilege heterosexual patriarchy, as they call it. 1 Corinthians 2 says, "We have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God." The spirit of the world seeks socialism by demanding social justice, but the Spirit who is from God desires something infinitely greater, salvation. Hear more at thechristianworldview.org, and then join us this weekend for part 2 of the Prosperity Gospel.
Listen to The Christian Worldview with David Wheaton, Saturday mornings at 8 Central on American Family Radio.
Fox News Commentary with Todd Starnes.
Hello, Americans. Never mess with a linebacker wearing a MAGA hat. That story coming up. The only thing that triggers a liberal faster than a Chick-fil-A sandwich is a guy wearing a Make America Great Again ball cap. Daniel Weldon was minding his own business the other day when he was set upon by a gang of leftist college kids. Mr. Weldon is 22, a student himself at the University of Florida. He was a linebacker for the Gators until he tore his ACL. He's also a big Trump supporter, and the leftists were apparently triggered by his Make America Great Again hat. Several of the female agitators punched the former football player, tried to steal the hat. He refused to lay a hand on the unhinged women, said his mama raised him right. They later fled the scene. No one was arrested. What kind of a pinhead would even think about punching a 6'1", 230-pound linebacker? It's like a Mack truck versus a Chevy Volt. I'm Todd Starnes.
That's your Fox News commentary.
The Hamilton Quarter podcast and 1-minute commentaries are available at afr.net. Back to the Hamilton Quarter on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner here at American Family Radio. We will open the phone lines this segment. And if you'd like to join the program, the number to call is 888-589-8840. That number again is 888-589-8840. Anything we've discussed today is open for conversation. Starting with the Galatians 6 scripture, where we talked about not getting weary and well-doing, or if you want to talk about Amazon joining the cacophony of people who only think sexuality is fluid in one direction. You can become homosexual, but you cannot move from being homosexual, according to Amazon and their book preferences. Or if you want to talk about George Soros and Charles Koch teaming up, Billionaire Boys Club for the global anti-war pacifism. Isn't that interesting? Or if you want to weigh in on this Jeffrey Upstein situation. Now, I expect they will try because, Trump derangement syndrome seems to be an incurable condition. I expect they will attempt to link President Trump to the whole Epstein scenario. President Trump said he doesn't know Jeffrey Epstein, not a fan of him. In fact, about 15 years ago, I believe, he barred Epstein from his Mar-a-Lago club in Florida. Dude was harassing a young girl. You can't hang out here, Chief. That's what President Trump, Yeah, but part of the connection that they're going to try to do is that apparently Alexander Acosta, who was a United States attorney in Miami, Florida, at the time Epstein pled guilty and received a light sentence, they're going to say that they're going to attempt to connect him to the fact that now Alexander Acosta is President Trump's Secretary of Labor. Now, I don't expect anything to stick there, not in the least bit. There is some audio from back in the day because Trump was in, obviously, New York, billionaire. He knew who Epstein was, but Trump says, I haven't talked to dude in 15 years, not my kind of guy, That's what they're going to try to. And if you haven't learned anything yet, facts are not needed for the media to go full on Trump assault, in case you haven't learned that yet. Do I need to remind you about the last 3 years? Facts. Facts, schmacks. It's all about narrative. But that said, and I said this before, anybody caught up in this nastiness, they need to go down. I don't care who it is. But old Slick Willie, I did not have sex with that woman. Slick Willie came out with a statement. It depends what the definition of is. This is what Slick Willie had to say. Oh, boy. Some of you right now say, I can feel the lies coming. Jason, get that bell ready. Slick Willie put out a statement in writing saying, quote, his representatives put out a statement, quote, President Clinton knows nothing about the terrible crimes Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to in Florida some years ago, or those with which he has been recently charged in New York. In 2002 and 2003, President Clinton took a total of 4 trips on Jeffrey Epstein's airplane, 1 to Europe, 1 to Asia, and 2 to Africa, which included stops in connection with the work of the Clinton Foundation. Staff supporters of the foundation and his Secret Service staff supporters of the foundation and his Secret Service detail traveled on every leg of every trip. He had one meeting with Epstein in his Harlem office in 2002, and around the same time made one brief visit to Epstein's New York apartment with a staff member and his security detail. He's not spoken to Epstein in well over a decade and has never been to Little St. James Island, Epstein's ranch in New Mexico, or his residence in Florida, end quote. That's what William Jefferson, did not have sex with that woman, Clinton said through his team. The question is, do you believe him? Because, Bill Clinton has a sterling record of being completely honest when it came to sexual misconduct allegations against him. Now, here's the thing. We know, this is not new information, that Bill Clinton didn't take 4 trips on Epstein's plane, known as the Lolita Express. I wonder why they called it the Lolita Express. We know President Clinton took 26 flights on this plane. You know how we know? Because private plane flying requires manifests to be filled out. So when traveling from one place to another, there has to be documentation on who's on the plane. And President Clinton said he only took 4 trips, and on every one of his trips on Epstein's plane, on every leg of the trips, his Secret Service detail was with him. But we know, on at least 5 of those trips on the Lolita Express, Clinton ditched his Secret Service detail. Say, bro, why you got to leave the detail, bro? Why you got to leave the Secret Service detail? What's going on the plane? Now, I wasn't on the plane. Of course. He could have been doing things completely on the plane on the up and up when he jettisoned his Secret Service detail. But what do you think went on that plane? So I'm just saying, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure this out. Bill Clinton is in some trouble. Is in a lot of trouble. And he's feeling the heat from that trouble. Now, don't get me wrong. When Epstein pled guilty in Florida, and he previously had something like a 53-page indictment against him for the entire sex trafficking scandal. He turns out to only getting convicted on one solicitation of prostitution charge in state court in Florida, where he's sentenced to serve a total of 18 months, does only really 13 months in jail, and he's allowed to travel. I mean, what? That is ridiculous. However, I don't know the details of the prosecution. So it will be interesting to see how these facts come out. But I'm going to tell you this. Epstein isn't offering to take a 5-year plea deal for nothing. And the fact that the New York U.S. attorney has additional evidence that will allow the reopening of this case, it sure doesn't look good for Epstein. And so I said it yesterday, I'll say it again. Everybody who's dirty, they all need to get held accountable. And it looks like it's going down this time around. With that, I'm going to go to the phone lines, and I'm going to go first to Pastor Norman in Mississippi. Pastor Norman, thank you for calling the Hamilton Corner. Welcome to the program.
Well, hello, Brother Abraham.
Hello.
All right. Hey, Brother Abraham.
Yes, sir.
This one is going to get real nasty.
I think so.
I'm telling you, I followed Epstein for about 15 years, just knowing of his activity, and would-be rich politicians like to hang out with him.
Mm-hmm.
Rich businessmen like to hang out with him, and it has been reported that he and Trump hung out a lot a few years back. In fact, he was at Mar-a-Lago and hit on the wrong person, and Trump had to bar him because. But people like Alan Dershowitz, all of those
about
folks,
that too.
I'm telling you, they are going down on this one. And here's why they're going down. If they didn't do nothing on the plane, they knew exactly what Epstein was doing.
That's a good
point. They knew what he was doing.
That's a good point,
and
Pastor.
That is, yep. So it's going to be bad for a lot of folks. And I agree with you. And here's what I want you to do. No matter who it is, I want you to deal with it like a good prosecutor. Okay?
Well, I'll tell you this much, Pastor Norman, and thank you very much for your call. I said it 1,000,000 times, and I'll say it again. No sacred cows here. If you're guilty, you're guilty. And as the evidence comes out, now the commitment that I do have is that I'm going to allow the evidence to dictate as to where it should go. I'm not going to try to speculate and try to say this person did this. That's why I didn't go into too much of the Dershowitz allegations. I didn't go into too much of the details of the various people. President Trump is reportedly had, and this is reports, been on one trip on the plane, but he said he doesn't know the guy. He doesn't like the guy. And as you just said, he barred him from the Mar-a-Lago resort. So I'm going to follow the evidence. And as the evidence comes out, no matter who it is, and it is right. I mean, this goes all the way into the British royal family. Prince Andrew is one of the people who reportedly palled around with Jeffrey Epstein. So you got the British royal family and American royal families. See what I did there? No kings and queens here, but they think they are. And I'm telling you, when you have him volunteering for 5 years, he's going to sing like a soprano in the church choir. Back to the phone lines. We go next to Tennessee, where Shirley is on the line. Shirley, thank you for calling the Hamilton Corner. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for taking my call. I just wanted to thank you for covering this story because I personally feel that too many of these people are getting off. The Clintons aren't in jail yet. It doesn't seem like no matter what they do, they're ever going to jail. And so my feeling is, personally, Epstein needs to go straight up the river for 45 years. We need to confiscate his islands. We need to take everything from him because that is a capital crime. And I feel like these other people are eventually going to get in trouble, too, because Clintons and all the rest of them, we know they've been dirty for a long time. They're associated with murders and probably at least about 24, I think I've counted so far. So, I mean, they're going to get theirs, but I think that these hell-bound sinners, being the Epsteins, the Kochs, and all of them, they ought to be trembling at having their last breath, because that's coming too. Trump said point blank that he said in the interview that Epstein, this is some years ago, I think it was 2010, is going to get in trouble for his actions on his little island or something like that. I heard that.
You're right.
And we live in a society where everybody wants everything free. They want reparations, which will never happen. It's foolishness. And anything. And these Democrats are sweating, trying to get themselves in office any type of way they can. And there's just a bunch of hell-bound sinning going on. And God, I'm praying that he will make the right things happen for us. And I'm praying for my fellow African Americans to stop listening to all this foolishness and listen to the Lord. And when it's time to vote for righteousness and holiness. And you know, we're just going to have to pick what they call the lesser of the evils. But I don't see nothing on the Democrat side.
All right, Shirley, we got to leave it right there. You said a lot. And I want to get to some other callers, and I want to share this too as we're prepared to go to the next caller. I don't know if many of you followed this, but Wimbledon just took place, the tennis tournament in England, and there's a tennis phenom, a new American tennis phenom by the name of Corey Goff. Her nickname is Coco Goff, who's 15 years old, who played in Wimbledon. Now, one of the things that's amazing about her, she was ranked number 303 in the nation, was invited as a wild card. She started playing tennis at 8 years old. Her father and mother, her father Corey and her mother Candy, both were college-level athletes, the father at Georgia State and his mother at Florida State, respectively. And they allowed Coco to pick which sport she wanted to play. And because of the influence of Venus and Serena Williams in the sport of tennis, Coco Gauff picked tennis. Now, the thing about it, when they got the call to be invited to Wimbledon, the father was on his way to take his daughter to a tennis camp in the south of France. And they asked her, would you like to play in Wimbledon at 15 years old? Well, she goes to the tryout, and she whoops up on the first three people that she played in straight sets. That's like a blowout, y'all. All right, if you're not familiar with tennis. And her entree round in the Wimbledon competition was against her childhood hero, Venus Williams, who she smashed in straight sets. Now, one of the things that's remarkable, she was being interviewed, and she was asked what was the most important legacy that her father instilled in her. You don't know what she said? She said, before every match since I was 8 years old, my dad and I would say a prayer together. We don't really pray about victory, just that me and my opponent stay safe. After her match against Venus Williams, she went to shake her hand and wouldn't let her hand go without thanking her for her inspiration. And she said that her goal was to play her best, but her dream was to win. And that's exactly what happened. And I just thought, man, this is amazing. Once again, another example of the influence of a father on their child that has now formed this young lady. She's 15 years old. And no matter what the match is, before every match, and they're not just saying some mamby-pamby prayers, she's praying for her opponent. How often do you hear that coming from 13, 14, and 15-year-olds? My dad taught me before every match, since I was 8 until now, to pray for my opponent, including the one against Venus Williams. I thought that was absolutely phenomenal. Phenomenal. One more call. This will be the last one for today. We'll go next to Arkansas, where Kevin is on the line. Kevin, thank you for calling the Hamilton Corner. Welcome to the program. You have 15 seconds. Go right ahead.
Yes, Epstein's Wikipedia page has been scrubbed of any connection with the Clintons, but they left Trump in there, so they're sacrificing their sacred cows to get Trump.
You're absolutely right. I saw that, Kevin. Minutes after the Epstein story broke yesterday, Wikipedia all of a sudden scrubbed all of the connections between Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein, but they certainly left any referencing to President Trump. I wonder why they did that. Don't you? Well, thank you for joining the program. And let me say this. If you have not yet placed your faith in Jesus for eternal salvation, inviting him to be the anchor of your soul, today is the day of salvation. Do not harden your hearts as the Spirit of the Lord draws you to himself.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of